Good morning, guys. Dr. Jeff here, physical therapist and running specialist from Run Live Well. Welcome to another episode of Run Live Well. What I thought we might talk about today is some more great stretches to help you run faster and better. We had a number of comments from you guys regarding the super stride stretch. As you know, it's my favorite stretch. It's the most common exercise that I've prescribed to injured runners over the years, and many of you can benefit from it. If you would like to learn more about this specific stretch, the super stride stretch, we have a whole video on it, so I won't go into it in too much detail today. One of the benefits of the super stride stretch is it really helps to open up the hip angle, the angle between your two femurs when your left hip is in full flexion and your right hip is in full extension. Elite runners such as Usain Bolt and Shalane Flanagan have a hip angle that's in between 115 to 130 degrees, so that really allows them this long stride. As the hip flexors tighten up or the glutes tighten up, this hip angle gets a lot smaller. And I see a lot of novice runners who have a hip angle of only 30 degrees, believe it or not. This is not going to allow them to run very fast because running speed is stride length times cadence. So unless they have a cadence like a hummingbird, they're not going to be able to run very fast. There has been a lot of controversy in recent years as to whether or not runners should stretch. I consider this a too broad question. You can't put all runners in one basket. Runners come in all sizes and shapes, ages, body types, and we have to consider what the question really is. Does it help to improve performance? And what exactly is stretching? There's dynamic stretches, there's PNF, there's static stretches. So when we ask the question, is stretching beneficial for runners, we really have to be specific about what we're trying to fix in the runner and what runner we're working with.
When running, we want our muscles and tendons to be stiff and springy. If they are, we can benefit from energy return of up to about 52% of the energy we push into the ground. This can result in faster running and improved endurance. So we want our muscles and tendons to be stiff when we're running, but there can be too much stiffness, and we can also be too flexible. Ideally, we want to be just in the middle. If we are too stiff, we may not have enough range of motion for a good stride length, and we may have enough limitation that we have to develop compensatory movements, which can include things like overpronation. On the flip side, if we're too flexible, we're going to have potentially decreased efficiency. Our muscles will act more like a slinky spring than a taut spring. And there can be increased loads on joints such as the knee with increased knee flexion.
So I've got my buddy Bart here with me today to help to explain how important good flexibility of all the different muscle groups around the hips and pelvis are. They're so close to the center of mass and they're so far away from the floor that they really control sometimes what happens with these long levers, our legs. So we've talked about already how hip angle is important for a good stride. So the hip angle can be limited by tight hip flexors over here on the left or tight gluteals on the right here. Other muscles that are important around the pelvis, though, are the tensor fasciae lata. It's a muscle that's we think of as being on the outside of the hip. It is, but it's more to the front. So when it's tight, it is a hip flexor as well. What will tend to happen as we push back violently into extension when the TFL is tight, it's going to cause your heel to whip outwards. And we've all seen runners that do this as they push off the ground. This is one of a few reasons that this can happen. So stretching out this TFL muscle can be very important for some runners. A tight TFL, because it attaches into the iliotibial band, can also put stress on the outside of the knee and cause runner's knee. This is a little bit more complicated, but tight hip flexors, if say we're limited to only a few degrees of hip extension because of a tight psoas or rectus femoris muscle group, if we really try and force the leg back more, what tends to happen is the whole pelvis tends to rotate a little bit this way, towards his right. What that does is it brings the other leg off and across midline, and this can be a common cause of a crossover gait, which can cause all kinds of problems up and down the chain, from overpronation to runner's knee to even iliotibial band syndrome. In modern times, I have noticed an epidemic of hip flexor tightness. I believe this is because we hold our hips in flexion most of the day. A lot of us are keyboard jockeys. We spend most of our night in a flexed hip position. So many of us are spending 20 plus hours a day with our hips in a shortened position. And muscles, like every tissue in the body, adapt. They adapt to their length that they're set at most of the time. Tightness in the different muscle groups, particularly around the hip, can cause a number of running gait deviations, such as overstriding, such as crossover gait, and medial and lateral heel whips. So if you have tightness in some of these muscles, you may benefit from some stretching. The stretches may help to improve your running form and even your running economy. If your hip mobility is limited to the point where you have a small hip angle when you're running, the distance, the angle in between your two femurs with maximum hip extension on the right and maximum hip flexion on the left. If you're one of these people, over a period of weeks and months, if you can improve your hip angle, your flexibility, you will be able to potentially run faster. The other area that I see limited mobility frequently in runners is in the calf muscles. Our calf muscles see upwards of 8 times body weight at points in the running gait cycle. This leads to a lot of microtrauma to the muscle. If we looked at the muscle on a special MRI 8 days after a long run, such as a marathon, we can still see some damage. So it's not uncommon for runners who are running 60 to 100 miles a week to have a lot of wear and tear on their calf muscles, and these micro tears in the calf muscle can lead to adhesions that can tighten up the muscle if you're not working on some flexibility work and mobility work. If the calf muscles get too tight, it can lead to a whole host of problems. It can contribute directly to problems such as plantar fasciitis, Achilles tendonitis, bunions, some of the most common running injuries that we see. So a little work on stretching out tight calf muscles, if you flunked the flexibility test, is going to help to allow you to run with better mechanics and faster. This study and other studies have shown that if you perform static stretching of your running muscles before you run, you won't be able to run as fast. You won't be able to jump as high. But this finding has been misinterpreted, I believe. It isn't that stretching is bad, it's that the timing of stretching can be bad. So if you stretch before you run, your muscles will be less springy. And we want our muscles to be springy when we run. We want them to act like a pogo stick, not like a slinky spring. Many of us, though, have mobility problems, and if you don't have the range of motion to run with good mechanics, you're setting yourself up for injury and you're setting yourself up for slower running. So the timing of static stretching is what's critical. So your static stretching needs to be done not before you run. You can do it as part of your cool down if you like, or at any other time during the day. And it should be something that if you really want to see improvements in your mobility and flexibility, you really need to do it daily, and you need to do it for about a month before you really see a lot of differences. Regaining flexibility and mobility is kind of like building strength or causing hypertrophy of a muscle. It's actually, in a way, a similar process. So think of your muscles as chains, and the chain is built up of chain links. Well, your muscle is built up of little links called sarcomeres. When we stretch for a period of weeks and months, the muscle will actually adapt and build in new links, new sarcomeres in series, and that gives you a longer muscle. When you strength train, these links, the sarcomeres, are also put down, and they're put down in parallel, and that gives you a wider muscle. So unfortunately, it really does take time to improve your flexibility. The changes that you see right after stretching are temporary. The sarcomeres have not been added in series in a few seconds of stretching. It really does take weeks and months. Okay, runners, I'm going to show you 5 or 6 quick flexibility tests that you can do on your own to get an idea if you're getting a little bit too tight, which may shorten up your stride. If you have the time or the resources, I would consider seeing a sports physical therapist who specializes in running to do a running biomechanics evaluation. But these quick tests can give you an idea if you're getting a little bit too tight, particularly in your hips and your calves. So you just need to get on a mat table and lay down with one leg over the side. There's different ways you can do this test. So I'm going to lay right down on my back. And then what I have runners do is just bring one knee towards their chest. And this is a 2-for-1 stretch. If you find that your right leg starts to levitate as you bring your left knee towards your chest, it tells you your hip flexor is too tight. You may also find at the same time that you feel tightness in your left glute. So it's a 2-for-1 stretch. The other stretch that you can easily do in this position is bring your leg up onto the table, and this is a hamstring flexibility test. So flex your hip to 90 degrees and then see how straight you can get your leg. If you can't get into within 20 degrees of vertical, well then you've got a little work to do on your hamstrings. Then to test another problem muscle, your tensor fasciae lata, you can roll onto your side. And for this test, all you do is keep your hip bone pointing up towards the ceiling and then let your leg drop down. If your leg levitates up here because of tightness in the outside of the leg, you've got some stretching to do in this muscle group. So particularly for ladies, the knee should be able to drop down below table level. Ladies need a little bit more excursion in their hips because of their different biomechanics, wider hips, and their contralateral hip tends to drop a little bit more when they're running, which would put more stress on the outside of the hip. So ladies need to be able to get their knee a little bit lower with this test. So 2 other quick flexibility tests that you can do with a dowel is get down into a lunge position. Your front knee is bent at 90 degrees. You want to put the pole for a vertical in the small of your back, and what you want to do in this position where you've got your hips at a 90-degree angle, which is a lot smaller of an angle than most elite runners will run with. Then in this position, what you do is you try and flatten out your back. We call this a posterior pelvic tilt, and if you feel tightness in this quad here, your rectus femoris is a little bit too tight. You won't be able to achieve that long stride like Ulrich Kipchoge or Shalane Flanagan. The other quick test that you can do for another problem areas in runners is, again, use the dowel as a vertical, bring your toes 4 inches from the dowel, and then just see if keeping your heel down, if you can touch your kneecap to the dowel. If you can't do this, you've got some calf stretching work to do. So as with everything running, the question is stretching good for runners? The answer really is it depends. If you are someone who is blessed with good genetics and good connective tissue elasticity, you may not need to stretch. If you're someone who has trouble performing some of the tests that we just did, you may benefit from some stretching to run faster and better. So guys, I'm going to have Giselle demonstrate some of the 5 most important stretches to do to maintain hip mobility so that we can continue to run with good mechanics. Giselle has done a whole video on this stretch. This is the super stride stretch here, stretching out her 3 main hip flexors. I won't get into all the details of this stretch because we have a whole video on this stretch. A cool thing you can do with this stretch, and all the stretches I'm going to show you today, is something called PNF. Proprioceptive neuromuscular facilitation. And this type of PNF is called contract relax, and what she's going to do is just contract her hip flexors and her quads by trying to push her toes down for 10 seconds, and then relax for 10 seconds, and she tries to take up the slack and come a little bit further. And what's really cool about this stretch, now once you get there, once you take up the slack, you need to hold it for 10 seconds. All right. What's really cool about this PNF stretching is you can see instant results. PNF and static stretching have been shown to be the most effective for improving flexibility and mobility. This is something that you do after you're running, not before. The research does show that you will actually run a little bit slower if you do this type of stretching before. So let's try a few more reps of the PNF here. So let's have you push down again, and then hold for 10 seconds. And then relax for 10 seconds. And when you're relaxing here, you're trying to take up the tension. There you go. You're going a little bit further. You got a little bit more range there. So some almost instant results. All right, So another area that runners tend to be really tight in is your hamstrings. She's not particularly tight, but imagine that she can only come up to about 60 degrees here. Contract relax works great for stretching hamstrings as well. So you can use, if you want to do this on your own, use a stretching strap, and then she'll just grab onto it like she's in a tug of war. And then what we have her do is press down for 10 seconds. So she's trying to contract the hamstrings to bend the knee. This is isometric contraction, and she can try and extend the hip as well. So pushing down for 10 seconds, and then relax, and then take up the slack, try and straighten the knee a little bit more. Look at that, nice. Hold it for 10 seconds, good. And then push down for 10 seconds again, trying to bend the knee isometrically, good. Really contract those hamstrings. And then relax, and then see if you can pull up a little bit further, and then another 10 seconds. So if you say proprioceptive neuromuscular facilitation twice, that's long enough. And good. All right. A couple of other muscles that runners tend to be really tight in is the glutes and the piriformis. For this stretch here, what she needs to do is grab on here and grab on at the ankle. Good. And then, if you want to do some contract relax with this one, you're trying to push down and out here with the knee. Down and out. Say P and F twice. Oh, you have to say the whole thing. Proprioceptive neuromuscular facilitation. And then hold it here for 10 seconds. P and F, good. And then try and take it, or press for another 10 seconds. This also works really good with a partner, but you can do it yourself. And then to get more of a pure glute stretch, what we do is a simple knee to chest stretch. So let's have you grab onto your knee, hug all the way in. You want to keep this leg down. Good, and then let's have you press down a little bit, push into your hands, really contracting the glute. And then relax and take up the slack. Keep this leg down here. And do 3 to 6 repetitions of these. So this last stretch works particularly well if you have a partner to help you. And this is a stretch for the TFL, a muscle that's commonly tight in runners. And so what your partner will do is just try and lift a slightly bent knee. So if you can bend your knee about 20 degrees, we get a better stretch here. You want to grab onto the outside of the kneecap, and then we just pull up until she feels a stretch on the outside of her hip. And then I have her push down for 10 seconds. P and F, good. And then let's have you relax and take up the slack. There we go. We got a few more degrees right away. And let's have you push down. P and F, good. And then we relax for 10 seconds. Take up the slack. P and F. And it works every time. Excellent. So a common problem that leads to overpronation of the foot, that's really common in runners, is tight calf muscles. So I just want to make sure that you guys are stretching out your calf. If you need to, a quick test to see if you need it is to just bring a pole 4 inches in front of your big toe, and you should be able, keeping your heel down, you should be able to bend the knee and touch the pole. And she's having trouble doing that, so she really needs to work on some calf stretching. A good stretch with this problem is to just put your heel up on the pro stretch here, and then we dorsiflex the big toe to really lock in that windlass mechanism. It's really holding up her arch here. And then all she does is she tries to weight bear through the heel until she can feel a good stretch in the calf here. Let's keep the knee bent at about 20 degrees. This is going to emphasize the soleus, and she's going to hold this for about 30 seconds. So you should feel a good stretch in this part of the calf. And then after 30 seconds, what she can do is she can straighten the knee all the way, point the toes towards the sky, and feel the good stretch up a little bit higher in the calf. Good? I think part of the confusion around whether runners should stretch, specifically static stretching, has come from years ago. When we were in high school, we all learned that we should stretch before we run. But we now know that static stretching will slow down our running if we do it before. We still see it at the beginning of every marathon. There's still a lot of people out there static stretching. Now, dynamic stretching is beneficial for the musculoskeletal system. In physical therapy, we say motion is lotion. So by just doing dynamic stretches, such as hip openers, we are lubricating our hip joint. We are mechanically warming up muscles and tendons. When you take connective tissue and just bend it back and forth, it's like bending a coat hanger back and forth. It warms up. the same thing happens with your muscles and tendons. So if you are a runner with tight hips and calves, you may benefit from some of the stretches that we've tried today. I hope they help you run faster and better. I hope these episodes have helped to bring you informative running content. Can you please smash that like and subscribe button so that we can continue to bring you new running content every week on our brand new running channel. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next week.